Hello, welcome to 𝗖𝗔𝗟𝗟𝗢𝗏. I'm Jyotika. Today I'll be discussing how to answer section B of paper 4 for A-level psychology. I have made a video earlier also, and thank you for all your love on that video. In that video, I had discussed some tips on how you can answer paper 4. Since the time I have shared that video, I have been getting many requests from students that not only do they want tips on how to answer sections B and C, they would like to see concrete sample answers for these sections. Now, I have a special site, 𝗖𝗔𝗟𝗟𝗢𝗏𝗖𝗛𝗑𝗠𝗔, in which I have shared sample answers, so do visit that site. And I have upgraded from the blog which I had earlier. Thank you for all the support on the blog, 𝗖𝗔𝗟𝗟𝗢𝗏𝗖𝗛𝗑�blogspot.com. From that, I have upgraded to alevels.𝗖𝗔𝗟𝗟𝗢𝗏𝗖𝗑ology.com. As of now, there's not a lot of stuff on that site. I am going to be trying to upload stuff regularly there. I'm a tutor by profession. I take tuitions for A-level psychology. You can contact me if you want to. I'm sharing my number in the description box. If you want online tuitions for the subject, you can contact me. So I'm busy. I'm not able to upload a lot on my site, but I will try to upload some more material on that site. Today, what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to be discussing one of the sample answers, which I'm not sure I've uploaded on the site or not, but it's an answer from section B of paper 4, which is about designing a study. I will be discussing both parts of the answer, how to design the study and how to justify the psychology and the methodology of the study. So parts A and B of section B, I'll be discussing both. I've selected the specialization of organizational psychology. I've picked up a question of section B from organizational psychology for this video. And this is because organizational psychology, at least in India, here in Mumbai where I am, it's a very, very popular specialization. So I thought that lots of students can benefit from this answer. Okay, let's begin with this video. Why I am discussing the sample answer when you can read it on the site for yourself is that I strongly believe, and it is a fact, that you should not try to memorize sample answers or model answers, whatever you call them, exemplars. They are not meant for memorization. Every year there are new questions that come up in sections B and C, so it is not going to make sense that you memorize any answers. That's not a good approach either. How much can you memorize? How many answers, how many possible combinations and permutations of answers can you memorize and go in the examination hall? So whenever you see a sample answer or a model answer, more than looking at the answer, you need to look at the writing style of the answer. What is then the content of the answer? What is the writing style? How has the answer been organized? How has the question been addressed? And that is what we are going to be doing in this video. We are going to have the sample answer in front of us. We are not going to be trying to memorize it or trying to read through it and understanding the content, just what is written, but what is the approach taken to answer the question. That is what we are going to address in this video. So let's start with the video and let's come to the sample answer. The first step towards writing a successful answer is to read the question well. And this is where a lot of students make a very big mistake. They're very anxious to complete the paper on time. That's why they don't read the question fully. They start writing the answer. Midway through the answer, they realize that they haven't read the question carefully, which is why whatever they have written in that much time has been a sheer waste. Instead of that, it is a wise student who will first read the question carefully, give the time needed to read the question carefully, and only then begin writing. So in today's video, the first thing I will teach you is how to read the question carefully for section B. My first suggestion is please focus only on part A of the question first. Leave part B aside. As such, part B is common to all questions of section B, so you know what it is even before you read it. But still, to avoid unnecessary anxiety of the latter part of the question, just focus on the former part of the question to begin with. In the part A of section B questions, no matter which specialization it is, here I'm giving a sample from organization, but what I'm telling you here is not applicable only to the specialization of organizations. No matter which specialization it is, in section B, part E, we need to look out for two things. One is, which is the research method we are expected to adopt when we are designing our study. The second is what the study is about. What is the topic of the study? Okay. Every time the research method is not mentioned in the question, as you must have seen for yourself when you have browsed through past papers, you must have seen that every single time they do not specify which research method you need to use. Sometimes you are left free to decide for yourself which method you feel is suitable. You can pick up that method. In today's question, however, which I've picked up for the sample answer, you can see very clearly that the research method is mentioned in this question, and the method mentioned is that of a questionnaire. This is the first most important thing, in fact, I would say that you need to notice, because the structure for every type of research method when it comes to designing a study is different. So for a questionnaire, there's a different way you go about designing a study as compared to if you're designing a study for an experiment or for a correlation study or for an observational study, whatever it is. So first, your mind should be set that you need to prepare a questionnaire study. And the moment you see questionnaire study, if you've been practicing well enough, you know how you need to structure your answer. The next thing, like I told you, you need to focus on what is the topic on which you need to design your study. Here the topic is management perceptions of bullying. Now when you read the topic part of the study, you should automatically have in your mind, again if you're prepared well, the part of the textbook or the section of the syllabus from where this topic has been derived. When I see management perceptions of bullying, I immediately remember 𝗖𝗛𝗟𝗏's study on bullying. And I know I have to design my study based on 𝗖𝗛𝗟𝗏's studies on bullying. When I see questionnaire, I know that I have to organize my study. Obviously, the basic structure of the study is the same across all methods. When it comes to questionnaire, experiment, case study, no matter what it is, there will be an aim. There will be a methodology, there will be a data analysis section, there will be some ethics I maintain. That I know is something that I have to keep in mind, all of this, when I am answering a study type of a question. But when I see the word questionnaire, when I see research method as questionnaire, I know my focus has to be on written question and answers. So I'm going to have to present few sample answers. Sample questions that I will be presenting to my respondents. I also know that questionnaires in general include close-ended questions because they are collected, the answers are collected in writing. I also know that there are quick methods, easy methods. So definitely there will be close-ended questions, maybe rating scales to collect answers on these type of questionnaires. So all these things are coming to my mind as I read the question. So just to revise, when we are reading the question, the first thing we are looking out for is the research method that has been specified in the question. If the research method is not specified, then there are a lot of options available to us. And again, if you've been practicing well, you would know which type of a method is suitable for which type of a topic. For example, if we have to determine a cause-effect relationship, we would better be designing experiments. However, if we would want to study some topic in real time as it takes place naturally, we would rather go for a field study, maybe an observation. So it isn't like we are free to choose just about any method. Our method should be suitable to the topic. But I'll leave this discussion for another day. Today we have our method specified. So today we'll focus on the questionnaire method. So the first thing we are looking out for in our question is the research method, and the research method here is specified as questionnaire. When I see the word questionnaire, what comes to my mind is a lot of question and answers, a lot of written question and answers, a lot of close-ended questions, quick collection of data in the sense that respondents should be able to answer quickly. So this is all that comes to my mind from what I have studied about questionnaires. I'm sure that is what you've been preparing through the year as well. These are the features of questionnaires that you have been preparing. So the purpose for looking out for the research method is to have our mind primed with what the features are of that research method. The next thing, like I told you, we look out for the topic. And the topic is management perceptions of bullying, which quickly brings to my mind 𝗖𝗛𝗟𝗍𝗔𝗍 study of bullying. And in that study, there were causes of bullying, there were types of behaviors that account for bullying, and there were some measures that can be taken against bullying. So there are a lot of things in my mind right now. So if you're prepared well, you'll have all of that in your mind once you read the topic. Okay, let's move ahead because all of this is covered in the sample answer. So now we look at the sample answer and see how this question has been addressed. As I mentioned earlier as well, any study begins with an aim. So you can see, as I told, when you're reading the sample answer, look out for what all is there in the sample answer. The sample answer begins with an aim. So the first thing it covers is an aim. The organization is such that the first step in designing the study has been to specify an aim. Aim is clearly mentioned in the question always. So in section B, in part A, we always find the aim specified. We just write it again to make it clear, to give a good start to our design. We just mention the aim again. We show that we understand the aim. It's also good practice. Like I told you, some students completely lose sight of what the question is because they're so anxious. So when you write down the aim, you stay focused on what you are supposed to be designing. So always begin your study with the aim. That is my suggestion. Now clearly the aim of this particular study is to investigate management perceptions of bullying. The questionnaire method of research is to be, so I've mentioned this as well. So first I've begun with the aim over here in the sample answer. The next thing I have specified what is the method of research. So this gives me a good beginning, a good structure to my answer, as well as it helps me to stay on track with my answer. Now coming to the main part. In any study, again, no matter what the research method is, we do have to specify who the sample of the study will comprise of, who will be included in the sample of the study, and what the sampling technique will be. So there are two things that we specify after the aim of any study. And if you have been a good student, especially in your last year, whenever you have gone through your course studies at the AS level, you must have seen the organization of every study that was included in the course study. So always it begins, any study begins with an aim, and then it proceeds towards the sample. So it's always useful, always studying your syllabus content well is the foundation on which you can start designing your studies yourself. So sample must include sample characteristics, the demographics of the sample, that's one, and the sampling technique. So any design, any study design is incomplete unless the sample characteristics and the sampling technique are clearly specified in it. Again, which sample would be suitable, which characteristics are desirable, which technique would be useful, depends on the topic of the study. Right now, we are looking at management perceptions of bullying. We want to include managers in our study. That is very obvious from the topic of the study. Definitely, one characteristic of the sample is going to be that they all are going to be managers. Now, how can we recruit managers? That is the next question. That will determine our sampling technique. Opportunity sampling is good. We can go to a nearby organization, request all the managers in that organization to be a part of our study. That's a good technique. Voluntary sampling is good, in my opinion, because a voluntary sample is suitable to the questionnaire technique the way I have designed it further. I have designed an online questionnaire, so for that I felt that a voluntary sample would be suitable. When you're deciding on your sample, of course, what I've presented here is just a sample answer. There are many ways of going about designing the same study for this very topic. But whatever method you choose, make sure it is following some logic of what is to come later in your study. When I've prepared this answer, in my mind, I have my outline very clear of my study, that I know it's going to be an online questionnaire. Respondents are going to have to click on some answers. The typical Google form type of a survey comes to my mind. So that is what has guided me through my answer. So even you should have some broad vision of what your study is going to be like, because then all elements will fit in correctly, such as the sample. Also, avoid making elements very unrealistic. If you say things like, we'll have a random sample, and you expect that, say, from all over the country, say all over India, you can get a list of all managers and randomly select a few of them, and you think that whoever you select will agree to participate in your study, I would suggest that you avoid such idealistic designs as far as possible and try to be as practical as you can. It just makes it appear that you're thinking in more realistic terms, and you are actually thinking as a researcher what is viable in actual life, which I think is a better way of designing a study, and it will help you in the future also in whichever field you want to pursue. If you want to pursue psychology, having a realistic imagination will be very helpful for you. That being said, it's up to you. It's just a study which you don't have to conduct. You can decide how you want to go about designing your study. I have selected a voluntary sample. It's suitable to my method. So here you can see I have mentioned that it's going to be a voluntary sample. Sampling technique is clearly specified here. And as concerns the characteristics of the sample, I have mentioned that they are going to be from different organizations. I have not restricted my sample to one organization because, like I told you, what is guiding me through my study is my basic plan that it's going to be an online survey. So I don't see any reason why only managers from one particular organization should be answering my questionnaire, why my sample cannot be more diversified. Of course, if you're choosing something like an opportunity sample for your study, you can have a more restricted sample. Okay, then what is next is, of course, I could have elaborated more on demographics, such as what would have been the age of the sample, what could have been the years of experience of the managers, in which position they should be working. There are a lot of things, and definitely you can include such elements in your study. But one thing I would like to tell you at this point is it is not necessary for your study to be exhaustive in terms of elements. It's not like each and every element needs to be specified, or each and every characteristic of each and every element needs to be specified. So when we are talking about sample characteristics, I have found that my study is fine even if I don't go into the age range, the gender, and all those aspects of the sample. I'm trying to conserve that much of effort, I would say those many sentences in writing my answer, because I want to put my focus on the actual questions that will be included in the questionnaire. So I don't want to give so much time and so much space in my answer to include demographics, which according to me are secondary as compared to the main features of the questionnaire, which are the questions themselves. So I have not elaborated much on sample characteristics. Of course, if you feel sample characteristics are very vital to the way you are designing your study, there is for some reason a vision of your study in which you want only female managers, or you want highly experienced managers, if that really matters to your study design, definitely you can take the time and devote the space in your answer to include the sample characteristics. I did not find it very important, so I have mentioned the basic characteristic that they're going to be managers from diverse organizations. I haven't gone into the depth of this section. Okay, next, very importantly, like I told you, my major focus is on the questionnaire itself. What type of questions are going to be, what is going to be the mode and the method of the questionnaire. So here I have mentioned the mode of the questionnaire. It's going to be an online questionnaire. So I mentioned that an online questionnaire will be created, link of which will be circulated on social media platforms. So when I'm saying it's going to be a voluntary sample, exactly how am I going to acquire this voluntary sample? I have made it clear with this statement, where I have mentioned that I'm going to have an online questionnaire and I'm going to circulate that questionnaire on social media platforms, where there's going to be a link, and anybody, any manager from any organization can answer that questionnaire. At least 100 responses is what I'm targeting. As I'm reading through this answer and explaining the elements to you, I want you to focus on which phrases in the answer I have highlighted. I mean, I've just underlined certain phrases. This is mainly, my aim is to highlight the major elements of my answer and to help the examiner read through the answer quickly. So I also recommend, when you are organizing and presenting your answer, keep on highlighting the important phrases. It becomes easier for the examiner to quickly read through your answer and make sense of it. So I've underlined the mode of the questionnaire, I've underlined the sampling technique, I've also underlined the sample size, because when I say that I'm aiming for at least 100 responses, that means I want at least 100 respondents to answer my questionnaire. So my sample size is a minimum of 100. So wherever there are essential features of any elements in my answer, I have highlighted this. Okay, a minimum of 100 is what I'm aiming for in my study, because of course these are questionnaires and I'm circulating them online. There is a possibility of getting more than 100 responses, and more the responses, better the representation. Also, it's going to be online questionnaires, so I'm not going to have to manually analyze the data. So why not have as many responses as possible? So again, I'm being very practical and realistic here when I'm saying that 100 or more responses can be collected. Okay, next they're telling us the message will also assure respondents of the anonymity of their responses. Here I have introduced an element of ethics in my study. When I see my students' answers, before I have trained them on how to write answers, many of them have this tendency to include ethics as a separate section in the study. I don't recommend that, because I believe that at whatever point the ethical issue is relevant, we should address it at that point only. So in the beginning of the study, if some ethic is important, I have mentioned it right there. Assuring respondents that their answers will remain confidential or anonymous is something we need to do right at the beginning, before they even start answering the questionnaire. So that is why I have mentioned it there itself. I prefer my answer to have a natural flow. Definitely you can divide your answer into sections like sample, material, ethics, data analysis, and have different headings and different sections. I just feel that when I think of a study, I like to believe that I'm the researcher who's actually conducting the study. I like to visualize the study step by step in my mind. It makes it interesting and easier to answer the question. So as I'm walking through the study in my mind, whatever comes to my mind, I keep on adding that. So I don't build separate sections, not in a section B, design a study type of answer. Okay, so here I've included an element of ethics. Do try to include relevant ethical issues when you're designing your study. Again, a lot of students have a tendency to include every possible ethical issue in the procedure. That's not required at all. If it's a questionnaire, anonymity is important, confidentiality is important, debriefing is important. Everything under the sun is not important for a questionnaire study. So let's keep irrelevant statements out of the answer, so that we have all our statements very focused on what has actually been asked, and our answer is as relevant as possible. Next, we can see responses will be collected over a period of 1 month. It's always important to specify the duration. So what I've highlighted here is the duration of the study. Of course, respondents will be able to answer the questionnaire within a matter of minutes. But what I'm giving the duration for is the period which I'm giving the respondents to answer the questionnaire overall. So I'm willing to have people answer the questionnaire anywhere between a 1 month period. Again, this is because I know that managers are busy people. So always justifying, always trying to make sense, thinking realistically. I know managers are busy people. I cannot expect that today I post a questionnaire, a manager sees that a questionnaire is listed, and immediately he leaves all his work and starts answering my questionnaire. So I would like to give some time. Also, because I'm circulating the questionnaire on social media, it can take time to reach out to different people. By the time people share the link and all, so why haste my study? Why try to complete it in just a few days? Let's give it 1 month for data collection. So I'm giving the total duration, the total 1 month period for the collection of data. Okay, so I'm trying to emphasize whatever I've highlighted, which elements those are. If you're designing this study or any study, do cover all these things. Sampling technique, sample characteristics, ethics, duration. If it's a questionnaire, what's the mode of the question? Is it going to be physically in writing, paper, pencil? Or is it going to be online? Is there something over the phone or something? That's totally up to you. Okay, let's come to the even more focused section now. Of course, studies should narrow down from broad aspects. They should get narrower and narrower. Roughly speaking, like I told you, any study begins with an aim, then it proceeds to the sample, then it proceeds to the main instrument or the tool. And here the tool was the questionnaire. Now we are going to discuss what kind of a questionnaire we are going to employ, what all are the features of the questionnaire. So here, from this point onwards, I have discussed features of the questionnaire. Questionnaires are best close-ended. In fact, in my opinion, an open-ended questionnaire is more like a written interview. It's not a questionnaire anymore, of course, but if you are free to include one or two open-ended questions as well in your questionnaire, it will make for more comprehensive data collection. I have focused on, again, what has been directing my mind while answering this question is that managers do not have so much time to answer full-fledged open-ended questions. So I have included only close-ended questions. Also, practically speaking, as a student, I think it's easier to link the theory to the questions when they are close-ended, as we will see ahead. So I've clearly mentioned what type of questions are going to be there, namely close-ended questions. And the close-ended questions, the response format is very important in a questionnaire. So I've also mentioned the response format. And the response format is that of a 5-point rating scale. I've also, whenever we mention rating scale, we need to mention, are the options going to be in numbers or are they going to be in words? In my questionnaire, the response options are going to be in words. I've specified those words. It's going to be from strongly disagree to strongly agree on a 5-point rating scale. The respondents will have to click on one of these options after reading every single question. So because it's an online questionnaire, they're going to be reading a question. You can imagine a Google form, and there are going to be 5 response options beneath every question, and then they just have to click on the one which is most true for them, which holds the most truth for them. So that is how I visualize my question, and that's what I'm describing in words here. So in this paragraph, I have discussed the main features of the questionnaire, which type of questions will be there, and what will be the response format. Going in further, continuing with the features of the questionnaire, definitely we need to present examples of questions that are going to be asked. The examples part is extremely important. No designing a study, especially when we're talking about designing a questionnaire, can be complete unless we include types of questions. If I'm the examiner and the examples of types of questions are not there in the answer, I will straight off cut a lot of marks. So definitely we need to have examples of which questions will be asked. This is also the best section for us to link the theory that we've studied in the syllabus to the questionnaire that we are designing. So it's extremely important. This is where we link the theory. If instead, just to give you an example, if instead of a questionnaire, we'd been designing an experiment, the task of the experiment that we would be describing, that this is what participants have to do in this experiment, that would be the section where we would link the theory that we've studied in the syllabus of whichever topic has been asked to the task which we are designing for the experiment. So here also, this is the key section where we are giving examples of questions where we need to link the theory. Here the theory we are going to link is 𝗖𝗫𝗬𝗖𝗔𝗍 theory. Also, though I don't want you to be anxious about answering part B like I told you earlier, but just to mention here that part B is where you need to justify your design with its psychological evidence. So unless you have this type of a section where you've given examples of questions that you're going to ask, you're not going to have any material to link over there in part B. So not only are you going to give a poor answer in part A, if you miss out on giving examples of questions, you're going to have a very hard time justifying the psychological evidence in part B. Let's see what are some of the examples, and we'll come back to linking the part thing in section B. Okay. Here what I've mentioned is one set of these questions will ask managers about behaviors that they perceive as bullying. Behaviors that they perceive as bullying. Where is this coming from? This is coming from 𝗖𝗫𝗬𝗖𝗔𝗍 study. Didn't he mention which behaviors account for bullying in the workplace? I have directly lifted off the ideas from there. And that is what we are expected to do as students. We don't have to create, one thing I've seen some students try to create their own material, the questions that they formulate for a question, or the task they design for an experiment, or the behaviors that they're looking out for in an observation seem to be out of their own imaginations. Definitely the examiners don't want you to prepare something out of your own imagination. They want you to apply the theory which you have learned in designing your questionnaires, questions or your task or your behaviors which you have to observe. So make sure that whatever you're picking up is from the theory which you have studied. So here you can see the questions are going to be about behaviors that are perceived as bullying. And let's look at what are the example questions for this part of the questionnaire. Do you think that ignoring an employee in the workplace counts as bullying? So one of the questions that my managers are going to read when they see my questionnaire, when they click on the questionnaire, is this question. Do you think that ignoring an employee in the workplace counts as bullying? What is my aim when I'm asking a manager this question? To find out whether he perceives this behavior as bullying or not. The study is about management perceptions of bullying. 𝗖𝗛𝗟𝗍𝗓 told us that ignoring an employee accounts for bullying. So my question is about ignoring an employee. That's how I've connected the theory to the topic in the question. Another question, another example here is, do you think that making remarks on an employee's race or gender counts as bullying? Again, I'm checking the manager's perception. Perception is just understanding. So does this manager understand, or does he perceive that making remarks on someone's race or gender, again something that 𝗖𝗛𝗟𝗍𝗓 mentioned, does this manager consider this to be bullying? Also another example, do you think that spreading rumors about an employee counts as bullying? Again, something 𝗖𝗛𝗟𝗍𝗓 told us, spreading rumors about someone is bullying. So let's ask the managers about this also. Do they perceive this as bullying or not? So that's going to be one section of my questionnaire. The next section of my questionnaire, another set of questions, will ask managers about organizational reasons that they perceive behind bullying. 𝗖𝗛𝗟𝗍𝗓 also told us that there are certain reasons for bullying. So why not tap into those also in our study? So you're talking about managers' perceptions. I want to know, what are the managers' perceptions when it comes to reasons or causes for bullying? Again, picking up from 𝗖𝗛𝗟𝗍𝗓's theory, I've included the questions, or I've formulated the questions around the points proposed by 𝗖𝗛𝗟𝗍𝗓. Here you can see some examples of the questions. Firstly, do you think not implementing rules and regulations in the organization results in bullying? When 𝗖𝗛𝗟𝗍𝗓 gave us the organizational reasons for bullying, he said this is one of the reasons, that rules and regulations aren't being implemented. So that is one of the questions I've included here. Next is, do you think absence of strong leadership in the organization results in bullying? Again, an organizational factor, lack of availability of good leadership. So I've formulated a question around that also. If you see, the structure of my questions are very, very simple. They are just including the reason given by 𝗖𝗛𝗟𝗍𝗓, and that's how it's supposed to be. The students become very anxious. How should I formulate a question? There's no big deal in it. Very simple wording. Just include points which are there in the theory and use a language which you think managers will be able to perceive, will be able to comprehend. So here the language, strong leadership, implementing rules and regulations, everyday language for managers. They'll be able to easily understand these questions. If instead this question had to be given to a layman for bullying, maybe I would have simplified the wording a little bit. Here it's not required. So in designing questions, don't try to come up with very fancy questions. Don't come up with convoluted questions. Too many questions mixed into one. Avoid those things. Keep the questions simple. Keep them linked to the theory. And keep in mind the sample, the respondents who have to answer. If needed, simplify the language of the questions. If not, you can retain the theoretical language for the questions like I have done here. Third question you can see. Do you think excessive competitiveness in the organization results in bullying? Another reason given by 𝗖𝗛𝗟𝗍𝗓, that if there's too much competition in the environment of the organization, there is going to be bullying. Let's come further into the study. Like I told you, my study is mainly focused on the questions which are going to be there because it's a questionnaire study. So the next part is another set of questions will ask managers about personal reasons that they perceive behind bullying. This part of my questionnaire is also about perception of reasons or causes behind bullying, but those were organizational reasons. These are personal reasons. So let's look at this part of the questionnaire. Let's look at what managers think are the personal reasons for bullying. How do they perceive personal reasons for bullying? The first question is, do you think that an employee who is envious of another employee tends to bully him or her? Envy, like 𝗖𝗛𝗟𝗍𝗓 pointed out, envy is one of the reasons for bullying when it comes to a personal or personality related reason for bullying. So one of my questions is about that. Again, very simple, very direct question. No attempt to beat around the bush, no attempt to link it with some behavior or ask indirectly, straight off, because it's about perceptions. I'm not accusing the manager of anything. I'm not asking the manager to say something controversial. I'm just asking him very routine questions. So there's no requirement to complicate these questions in any way. When not required, please do not unnecessarily complicate questions. In real life also, I hope you have gone across some of the questionnaires that are there in your syllabus, such as the JDI, the QWL, and all of those. I hope you have seen what straightforward, direct language is used in those questionnaires. Learn from them. Whenever you have something included in your syllabus, learn from it. Read through them. That's from where ideas come to designing your studies, and that's where you tend not to go wrong if you have done your studying well. Okay, next question is, do you think that employee who is unassertive tends to be bullied by others? Lack of assertion, lack of assertiveness. That is one more reason given by 𝗖𝗫𝗟𝗟 for bullying, a personality factor. So I've included it here. And the third question, do you think an employee who's from a minority race or sex tends to be, I'm so sorry, buried, it should be bullied more by other employees? Again, a reason given by 𝗖𝗫𝗟𝗍. Okay, so I have given sample questions. I definitely recommend at least 5 sample questions. I had my questionnaire divided into 3 different parts. So I gave 3 example questions in every part or every section, for making for a total of 9 example questions. Include an abundance of example questions to make your questionnaire very, very clear to the examiner. And like I told you, to have enough material to link it in part. What after the questionnaire? What after specifying what is going to be there in the questionnaire? Very important. Data analysis is very important. Lots of students design studies and end them with the designing of a task for an experiment or a set of questions for a questionnaire or interview, or a list of behaviors for an observation. That's never the ending point of a study. The ending point of a study is always with how data is going to be analyzed. So that section should not be missing. Even before that though, logically flowing with the question, I have included some more ethical issues which come at this point. So first, let's look at another ethical guideline that we need to follow. Once the managers finish answering the question, they will receive a message thanking them for their participation in the study and explaining to them the true purpose of the study. This is where I'm following the ethical guideline of debriefing. Because they're answering online, I cannot visit them personally. Neither would I like to call them for a meeting. I'm sure they don't have time for these things. So I just include a message at the end of my questionnaire where I have explained what the questionnaire was all about. I explained to them things like, what are managers' perceptions of bullying? What do we mean by that? What has been 𝗖𝗫𝗟𝗍𝗓's theory? Of course, not the whole of it. They don't have the time to read the whole of 𝗖𝗫𝗟𝗍𝗓's theory. Perhaps they already know about it. Just a gist of 𝗖𝗫𝗟𝗍𝗓's theory. And of course, thanking them for their valuable time. So here I have followed the ethical guideline of debriefing, and I have included it in its logical, systematic position. Now, like I told you, very importantly, the next paragraph is about data analysis. The responses collected from respondents will be subject to quantitative analysis. As I told you earlier, in my opinion, questionnaires should be all about closed questions. If by any chance you have thought it appropriate and you have included open-ended questions, please include qualitative analysis as well. You will be required to do that. Since my questionnaire had strictly close-ended questions which were going to be answered on a rating scale, like I mentioned, from strongly agree to strongly disagree, I would definitely go in for quantitative analysis. That is appropriate to the method which I have used. The total scores of each respondents for every section of the questionnaire will be totaled, and percentages will be calculated to check which behaviors and reasons most managers perceive as constituting or encouraging bullying. Percentages will be calculated. I hope you've studied last year and you've revised this year well your quantitative analysis section. One way is we can count scores, we can come up with frequencies, convert frequencies to percentages. So I have felt percentages would be useful. Of course, I could have calculated means as well for every section, but I thought percentages are more suitable here because I just want to know how many managers, the question that comes to my mind, how many managers consider, for example, that unassertiveness leads to bullying, and how many what percentage of managers do not feel that this is what accounts for bullying. So I just want percentages for comparison. For me, more than how much they consider whether a behavior is bullying or not, for me it is important to consider how many of them think that a particular behavior is bullying or not. So definitely we can have percentages, and of course there would be some cutoff points because it's a rating scale. So at some cutoff point I would consider that this is a manager who considers that these are the reasons for bullying, and this is a manager who does not consider that this particular reason is there for bullying. So point by point or question by question, I would like a comparison of managers for every reason or for every behavior that accounts for bullying, because the study is about managers' perception. So I would like to know any particular behavior, any particular reason for a behavior, how many managers perceive it as accounting for bullying and how many do not. So that's how I'm trying to meet the aim of the study. For example, it will be analyzed how many managers consider ignoring as bullying, how many consider making discriminatory remarks as bullying, etc. So I've just given a few examples to make it clear what I mean by calculating percentages. So what I mean by calculating percentages is picking up any one behavior such as ignoring others and seeing how many managers feel that ignoring others is bullying and how many feel that ignoring others is not bullying. So this is the way I have designed my study. Numerous options to design your study. This is not a fixed way. Of course, it's just a sample answer. And this is one of the ways you can go about. With this, I've completed part A of my answer. Part B is relatively simple, though it seems to be difficult to a lot of students. But in fact, it is the one where if you have done your A section well, you have a fun ride in answering section B. Before that, though, I would like to summarize what I have covered in section A. In section A, if I speak broadly about which sections we have covered in the answer, which steps we have taken in designing the study, our first step was to identify the aim of the study. We have not designed an aim for the study, it was given to us, so we've simply identified what was the aim of the study. In the next step, we described the sample of the study. In the third step, we designed the instrument for the study, which was our questionnaire. In the next step, we mentioned about data analysis, how data will be analyzed. So when I'm designing a questionnaire study, my broad outline is to have the aim of the study identified, from there have the sample specified, from there have the instrument, that is the questionnaire specified, and then to have my data analysis specified, how data will be analyzed. At every step, of course, there's a finer or a narrower plan that I get into. When it comes to the aim of the study, there's no further bifurcation. When it comes to the sample of a study, and this is not only for questionnaire, for any study that I'm designing, my sample always needs to consist of what I would call relevant characteristics, because there are far too many things to consider really when it comes to selecting a sample for a study. I really think none of us have the time to describe that much in the answer. So considering the topic of the study, what is relevant, we describe our sample to that extent. Of course, the sampling technique. It's a must to mention which sampling technique we are using. When it comes to instrumentation, the tool, if it would have been an experiment, the task we are designing, an observation, the behavior we're going to look out for, a correlation study, the tests that we are going to use, whatever the instrument is, you're talking specifically of a questionnaire. Within the instrument, we need to consider, within a questionnaire, what are going to be the type of questions, in the sense closed or open. So the nature of the questions, nature of the responses, type of responses. The mode of the questionnaire, is going to be paper, pencil, audio, online, what it's going to be, and examples. Again, whether everything is required or not depends on you, how you're designing the study. I think it's best to specify all of these aspects of the questionnaire. In data analysis, we need to mention whether our data analysis is going to be quantitative or qualitative. And then within that, quantitative or qualitative, exactly how. So if it's quantitative, is it going to be about means? Are we going to draw up some graphs to represent our data? Though I do not recommend going into those kind of details of how you're going to represent data. It's up to you. You can have a discussion of that. But I would definitely recommend discussing whether you're going to be calculating frequencies, percentages, mean, median, mode. You need to calculate standard deviation, what it is that you need to calculate. Keep it as simple as possible, unless you have very good knowledge of what needs to be done in the case of which type of data. So I've kept it very simple. I've kept it up to percentages. When it comes to qualitative data analysis, are you going to establish inter-observer reliability? I mean, in this study, if you were going to have open-ended questions, you would have to interpret the answers on those questions, because there's no numerical analysis that you could do of that. How would you interpret? Would you interpret along with two more researchers, and then you'll hit pool in your answers and calculate inter-rater reliability for that? If you have qualitative analysis, you need to consider such issues. So that's about answering part A. Let's quickly get into answering part B as well in this video itself. Part B. I haven't looked at the question. Let's look at the question for part B. Part B, standard question. Explain the psychological and methodological evidence on which the questionnaire is based. As I've discussed in my previous video on this topic, answering section B and C, this is the part of the question of section B where you need to justify. The key word here is justify. Justify why you have used a particular method in designing your study. Justify from where the elements of your study have been derived. Why you have thought it suitable, in this case, because it's a questionnaire, why have you thought it suitable to ask these particular specific type of questions only? Why is the content of your questions like this? So that's the part of psychological evidence. Justification means you're answering the question, why? When you're answering about psychological evidence, why are these particular questions included in your questionnaire? Why are, if it's an experiment, why is this the task that participants have to do? If it's an observation, why are these the behaviors that you're observing in your participants? So justification or why is what you do in psychological evidence. Basically, psychological evidence is about linking your study, the study you've designed in part A, so linking A with the theory in the syllabus, which is from where the topic has been derived from part A. That is what you do in the case of psychological evidence. So like I told you, only if you have been keeping the theory in mind when you've been answering section A, will you be able to justify this part of psychological evidence. Otherwise, you have lost your 4 marks in this part. When it comes to methodological evidence, you need to justify the research method outlined. In this case, it was questionnaire. So why was it a good idea to use questionnaire? They've asked you to use a questionnaire, but you're the one who's going to have to justify why it was used. Or if you have selected a method, why did you select that method? So this part is all about justification. The biggest mistake students make in this section is to get very, very descriptive. This is not paper 3. This is paper 4. Paper 4 is not the place to describe theories or to describe features of a research method like questionnaire. Paper 4 is all about application. I know you know this, but it is helpful to have a reminder at this point that this paper is about application. So we will not just describe 𝗖𝗓𝗂𝗖𝗔𝗟𝗍's theory like we do for paper 3. We will not describe what a questionnaire is as we do for paper 3. We will link the key features of a questionnaire with the study we've designed in part A. We will link 𝗖𝗓𝗂𝗖𝗓𝗍's theory's proposals with the questions that we have designed in part A. That is our job in this part. So once we have this clarity in our mind, I really don't think it's difficult to answer part B. Let's look at the example to clarify further. Starting with the psychological evidence for the study. Now, the psychological evidence for the study comes from 𝗖𝗓𝗂𝗖𝗓𝗍's review of doing that work. Definitely, we should know the name of the researcher. I know it sounds silly to mention it here, but I have had a number of students who do not remember researchers' names or the spellings of their names correctly, and that's really bad. When you're studying a subject, please have respect for the researchers who've done a lot of work in the area and take the time to remember their names. So 𝗖𝗓𝗂𝗖𝗓𝗍 in 1999, he presented a review study of bullying at work. That is from where we have based our study or in part A. So here we are just firstly making it very clear to the examiner that we know what we are talking about. 𝗖𝗓𝗂𝗖𝗓𝗍 found that there are 5 types of bullying at the workplace. Am I describing his theory here? Have I mentioned this so that I can describe his theory? Not at all. I have mentioned this because I have considered the types of bullying when I have designed my questionnaire. So the types of bullying which were identified by 𝗖𝗓𝗂𝗖𝗓𝗍, I've mentioned them here, which are the 5 types. But why I have mentioned them here is to quickly in the next sentence link it with my study in part A, and this is the link. So accordingly, questions for the first set of the questionnaire designed in part A were derived from these categories. That is why I have mentioned what 𝗖𝗎𝗓 has presented, not to describe it like I would in paper 3, but to justify, to say why my questions in section A of my questionnaire in part A were the way they were, because I've picked up from 𝗖𝗎𝗓's theory. That's why I have asked questions relating to social isolation, personal attack, verbal threats, such as we asked a question about rumors being spread. We asked a question about employees being isolated. From where did these ideas come in our mind? Because we have studied the review paper by 𝗖𝗎𝗓. Further, he found reasons behind bullying, including reasons personal to perpetrators and victims, such as aggression and enviousness in the perpetrator and excessive sensitivity and anxiety in the victim. Again, am I describing his theory? Not at all, because in the very next sentence, I am linking this part, the reasons of the perpetrator and the victim's reasons for bullying. I'm quickly linking it with the second set of questions that I've designed in part A. So I'm linking that, okay, this was the part of 𝗖𝗎𝗓's theory from which I have derived my second set of questions. Finally, he found factors in the organization can also serve as reasons for bullying. So that part of the theory, again, I've mentioned it so that I can link it to the third set of questions which I have presented. This is what we have to do in psychological evidence. Whatever we've kept in our mind as guidance for answering part A of the question, we have to specify it here that this is from where we have drawn our examples. Again, if it was an experiment, we had designed a particular task that participants should be doing, we would have to point out to the theory from where we felt that this task is appropriate for participants to perform. Or if it was observational study and we were mentioning that these are the behaviors we are going to observe, we would have to mention that part of the theory from where we have decided that these are the behaviors which indicate that bullying is taking place, or these are the behaviors which indicate that sabotage is taking place, whatever the question is. So that is what we do in the psychological evidence part of the question. Methodological evidence, they clearly told us to use a questionnaire. And questionnaire, it comes under the broader category, as we know, of self-report research method. So I've mentioned that it's a self-report method and it's a questionnaire because I'm going to be justifying why a questionnaire was very suitable for this study by making use of both the good features of a self-report method and the good features of questionnaires in particular. So that's why I've outlined in the beginning only that it's a self-report measure, and now I will use this point to justify why my method was very suitable to the study. Questionnaires are designed for quick collection of objective data. As you know, quick work for respondents to answer a question is just a matter of minutes, and objective data is collected. I, as a researcher, need not interpret whether managers are perceiving certain behaviors as bullying or not, which I would have to do in the case of an interview. If I asked a manager in an interview, which behaviors do you take as bullying, and he gave me a long drawn answer for that, I would have to pick up sections from his answer and decide, okay, this is what he considers as bullying, that is what he considers as bullying. When I administer a questionnaire, I very directly ask him, do you consider this particular behavior as bullying? And he tells me yes or no. So there is no room for my interpretation. It's a clear yes or no from his side. And such data is unbiased, no interpretation involved. It's completely objective. So first I've mentioned that self-report or questionnaires are objective. They're quick collection methods. And now I link it to the study. Accordingly, in the present study, we had a close-ended questionnaire in the form of a rating scale that could be answered very quickly and at the convenience of participants. Why was this necessary? Because the participants were managers. They don't have time to answer long-drawn interview type of questions, open-ended questions. They don't have time to answer those. Also, they would not have much time to devote to the answers. And of course, objective data is always helpful. We need not mention that. We always want data that is free from bias. Further, since the questionnaire could be answered quickly, a large number of responses, at least 100, were targeted to increase the representativeness of responses. See, one thing when we are justifying methodological evidence, definitely the main method which we have used, like in this case we have used questionnaire, we need to justify that. And that's the beginning point for my answer, if you see. But there are a lot of other elements also in the method which we need to justify. It is not possible for a student to justify every element of the study. So what my advice would be is you justify the main method, like I've justified use of self-report questionnaires, and pick up a few elements which in your judgment are important to be justified here. I thought the sample, because I mentioned that there should be at least 100 managers answering, it's a large sample size. So why such a large sample size would be useful? I thought it would be good to justify it here. So I've included this. Whichever feature you feel of your study methodological feature is important to be justified, you could justify that here. It need not be an exhaustive list. You need not justify every element that you're using, just the important ones. So here I have justified the sample size. So when I've said that I would like at least 100 managers to respond, why is that? Because a large number of responses would increase the representativeness of responses. We know that larger the sample, more representative of the whole population that it is. So if a lot of managers answer my questionnaires, then I get a good representation of all the managers of the country or whichever population I am targeting. So to increase representativeness, I included at least 100 responses. I aimed for that, and because it's an online questionnaire and a close-ended one which can be answered very quickly, I don't think it's impossible, practically speaking, to have those many responses. 1 month time. 1 month time is the duration. Here I've justified the duration of the study. Was also stipulated to allow as a large number of participants to stipulate as large a number of participants as possible to answer. So yes, why I have included a long duration, I felt I should justify that as well, because 1 month sounds long. Why I have included that 1 month duration is because I am targeting a large number of responses, like I mentioned in the previous sentence. So that is why I've included this as well, that I would like a large number of responses to be collected, even if it takes a long time to get those many responses. No hurries here. Finally, quantitative analysis of the data in form of computation of percentages was planned, since close-ended yield numerical numerical scores which can be analyzed objectively. So again, focusing on the objective analysis part, here what I've justified is data analysis. So what I've said here is that quantitative analysis again helps me in objectivity. Just like questionnaires are getting me objective data to begin with, the collection of data is objective. In the same way, the analysis of data is also objective, because if I have numerical information, why not analyze it as objectively as possible and get error-free, bias-free results? So that's what I'm aiming for, and that's how I've justified my use of quantitative analysis or use of percentages to analyze my data. Okay, so as you can see, if we've designed our study well, I think this section is not difficult to answer at all. Okay, let's summarize what we've covered in this section. Starting from the psychological evidence, what we've covered here is 𝗖𝗛𝗟𝗟𝗖𝗛's review study of bullying. And in this paragraph, what I've done is I have picked up various features from 𝗖𝗛𝗟𝗟𝗖𝗛's study that I've actually used in designing my study in part A, and I've linked those to the exact sections where I have used those parts of his theory in my design study. So I have linked one feature of the theory that I've used in one section of my study and shown the link explicitly in this part of the answer. That has been what this whole paragraph is about. The whole paragraph has been about linking the theory with the study which I have designed. And the second paragraph has been all about linking the method which I have used, the questionnaire method, linking its features with my design study. So again, what I have linked is certain aspects of the methodology which I felt were important to justify. It's your judgment. It can be random also. You can just randomly justify a few elements. Though personally, I would say justifying ethics is not very important. It's understood why we maintain ethics. So things which are more necessary, which are more specific, which are not very generalized, if we can justify those, it's better. So what I've chosen to justify in this section is, of course, the larger method of the self-report questionnaire, and then specific elements like sample size, duration, and data analysis. I felt those were the sections I needed to justify. So I have done that. Again, how have I justified? Taken the feature, taken its strength. For example, a large sample size, strength is representativeness. So taken the strength of the feature or its importance and linked it with how it contributes to making my study design a good study design. So that's what all I have done through this section. Okay, that ends today's video, and I hope this is helpful to you. Lots of students asking for sample answers. and I feel disappointed when students want to memorize those answers and go in the exam hall. So what I've tried to do here, like I told you earlier, is to give you an idea of how you should go about answering. More than how you should go about answering, that's something I've covered in the previous video. Here I've given you a way of analyzing sample answers or model answers that come in front of you. So if you're visiting my site, especially I can talk about myself because the answers I've written, I know what ideology I have followed in writing those answers. So if you're visiting 𝗖𝗫𝗟𝗟𝗖𝗛𝑔�psychology.com, if you're visiting this site, it's free, all the content is free. If this is the site you're visiting and you're seeing some of my sample answers for paper 3, for paper 4, I want you to take this approach of reading the answers like we did today. What did we do in this whole video? When we were reading the answer, we did not read the sentences superficially. We read them in depth. We saw which element is being covered in which sentence, how the elements are being linked to the syllabus that we have studied, how the elements are addressing the question that's been asked. So that's my vision. I want you to go on 𝗖𝗫𝗟𝗟𝗖𝗛𝗟𝗟𝗖𝗑𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 give you sample answers and other wonderful sites which are there. Wherever you're reading a sample answer, I want you to adopt this approach. This video has been about the approach you should use in reading sample answers, because only if you take this approach to reading sample answers will those answers be useful to you. Otherwise, if you're just going to read them from a memorizing perspective, or just to see which points have been covered, what are the points. Many times students use the word points. I don't think that's really very helpful in helping you answer the questions yourself. And like I told you earlier, there's no predictability to which question will be asked in the next paper. So do not assume this is like psychology is like a few other subjects where questions are pre-decided. It isn't like that. There is a lot of scope to create very, very novel psychology questions, and that's what the paper setters do. They create questions as unrelated to the previous papers as possible. So having said that, I thank you for being a part of this video, and I'll try to come up with some other very helpful videos soon. Stay tuned to my channel Excelling Psychology. And like I told you earlier, because there are a lot of queries that come in, do I take personal tuitions? Yes, I take online tuitions for A levels. So if you want tuition, you can read the description box below. I have given my contact number there. So once again, thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you soon in another video.